welcome to the show, The Other Side of the Curve. I'm your host, Debra Katz, and I am thrilled to have two very special guests today. This show is all about interviewing extraordinary people who are living extraordinary lives, doing extraordinary things, going well and above, beyond the extra mile in whatever they do in their professions, always striving to improve their own performance and the performance and lives of others. And so today I'm really excited to start off introducing Ed, Riordan, and Daz Smith. And Ed, I'm really glad it was your idea to come together, and you've been saying that you've been wanting to have someone interview Daz Smith. So I thought, well, who better than to have yourself interview him with myself too, because I always have a million questions for Daz. Daz is the editor of 8 Martinis magazine, and both Daz and Ed have been remote viewers for a very long time. And I thought that even though what we're going to be doing here is really talking about the details of this work and this profession and just talking about whatever we're most passionate about, just for those who are new to the subject, if we could just get very brief definitions of what you see remote viewing is. And let's start off with you, Ed.
Oh, definition of what remote viewing is. Well, I'll say what remote viewing is to me. Remote viewing is a perceptual expression for our ability to access other dimensions, our ability to access other realities somehow. We don't know how, but we seem to have the ability to do it. And remote viewing is our ability to express that, either on paper or whiteboards or some type of media. That's what remote viewing is to me. To me, remote viewing is a form of perceptual expressionism.
Okay, thank you. And Daz, how about yourself?
To me, remote viewing is kind of a creative process, really, and it's a process whereby a person that we call a remote viewer can essentially access objects, events, people, places, remote from them in time and space.
And so really it is about using one's psychic abilities, intuitive abilities. Would you agree with that? I mean, I know sometimes I hear remote viewers say, well, we're not really being psychic. And I'm like, well, wait a second. This is all about being psychic. Why do they do that?
Yeah, it's definitely using, I tend to not use the word psychic if possible. I use the word intuitive, because psychic tends to have a few negative connotations out there in the wider world. For me, it's using your intuitive ability, which again, I feel is very, very close and maybe even be the same thing as your creative ability is. It's both at the same time, I believe.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Ed?
Well, I think that we tend to repeat a lot of the things that were taught or whatever in regards to remote viewing. So they didn't really want to use the term psychic in the military because it's so loaded, like Daz says. But I think it's kind of an unusual word, and it's hard to really define what it really is. And I'm kind of okay that we kind of moved away from it. I think remote viewing is a very good term. We got some other terms for it that I think are more neutral, that allow us to kind of try to understand the process. Remote viewing is a process, and that's a very important thing to keep in mind about it. So trying to fit it into one word, I think, is where we kind of get into trouble, and it becomes confusing. And I've been trying to kind of focus on that a lot in my videos, because a lot of these terms really confuse people. And I think there's a lot of even remote viewers or people who are trying to learn remote viewing, they become confused by them as well. And so I think as we continue to kind of break out of some boxes or some ways that that remote viewing has been presented to us, I think we're going to kind of expand out and be able to kind of describe it in different things other than psychic or those types of things. But is it a psychic expression? Absolutely. Absolutely it is.
And I'm glad that you mentioned your videos, Ed, because I love watching your videos. They're very informative, and they give us such a great look into the inner workings of a remote viewer's mind and everything you go through. And I love having you and Daz together, because you do your videos as far as at your house, just showing your processes as you do different targets that either you've chosen or someone has chosen for you. And then Daz, obviously, maybe our viewers don't know, he has been working with the Farsight Institute as a independent viewer. He does a lot of other things apart from that, but he's been one of the main viewers, along with Dick Allgaier, in some incredible projects where they looked at things like the Phoenix Lights and 9/11. And what was the most recent project, Daz, that you worked on?
There's two. And it was two projects in one, because Courtney does like to mix them up. It was the JFK assassination, and also a psychological kind of examination of Hitler.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that. And maybe you can give us a few things that you discovered about Hitler as we're going on here. But the reason I love having you guys here is because there really isn't that many viewers right now doing things on video demonstrations. A lot work so much on their own in their own homes, and then maybe they get together as groups and share their work, exchanging their sessions. But it's just incredible to be able to see it on camera and see that inner process. And you know what? One of the things that strikes me when I see you guys work is just, I'm sure you're the same way, that many times we hear these skeptics who are debunking remote viewers or psychics. And I think, my gosh, if they understood the amount of work that goes into what we do as far as training ourselves and practicing, and just there's a lot of anguish and angst in what we do, because, you know, we never know if we're right. We're trying so hard to get the incorrect data out, and we work so hard. So the idea that there's people out there that either just think we're lying or we're faking or something, when we just know, I mean, you guys, I'm sure, like, lose sleep over, did you do your sessions right, and how can you improve, right? This is how it is for so many viewers, and yet people just don't get to see this until sometimes when they see your work. I think it helps give a little more insight.
Well, I think so. I think that the importance of putting out work on video is that it gives people a perspective on what remote viewing is that they just can't get if they're listening to a radio show, or even if they see paper sessions on a PDF file or something like that, where they're looking at specifically at the results. I think that's looking just at the results. This is my point. This is my particular point of view, is that too much emphasis on just the results is like looking at that image of the tip of the iceberg. You know, you're looking at the tip of the iceberg, and below the water is everything else. And I'm interested in everything else. And I think that the importance of video is that it's showing everything else. It's showing the expression, it's showing the process, it's showing what it looks like to go into a space where you're accessing some other dimension. And I think that has been the missing piece for how people even look at this topic, because prior to that, it was somebody on a radio show coast to coast or something like that, where they're listening, and what are they talking about? They're talking about the results. You know, they're talking about the topics, you know, the doom and gloom crap, or they're talking specifically about results only. And so the point of view is on this one specific thing, but there's so much more. You know, there's so much more to the process than just the end result. And so the video aspect of it allows people to say, okay, well, that's what it looks like when someone is going into this space. They're not in a dark room and, and the eyes are rolling back and, they're doing, it's a whole nother thing. And so I think that this kind of work is inspiring a lot of people. I know that Daz's projects inspire a lot of people. They're hitting on things that people want to see, because you have to, like Courtney is an expert marketer, so he knows how to market really well. So the subject matter is marketed well, and it gets a lot of interest. So people get to see topics that they're interested in, as well as seeing what the process, what it looks like for Daz Smith to go into the space that he goes into to produce the kind of amazing results that he produces. Or Dick Allgaier, what Dick Allgaier goes through in the process of moving this perception, this thing that's inside of him and inside of Daz, and being able to unload that onto a whiteboard and what that looks like. It's in my view, it's the missing piece as to how people even look at this topic. The biggest problem that I've found in all these years is how people actually look at remote viewing. And it's been in this very narrow little box. And that box is starting to explode.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because they're not with us when we're doing this, and they don't get to see the whole process, and they're not with us through the beginning and every little step. Daz, can you tell us what it's like to do your sessions on video, and how has this changed your work? Because you've been doing remote viewing for years. Is it changing even the information that you get, or the quality or level of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I pretty much mirror what Ed was saying, really. And I have to be honest, when Courtney approached me and said, you have to start doing your sessions on video now, I was quite hesitant to do this. Being a remote viewer that was stuck to paper all these years, I didn't really see the need for it. And I really did not want to do it. But the weird thing is, it actually flowed quite well. It came quite natural, and I think because we use CRV, and it's essentially a process where the 6-stage method is there to distract the mind. I think the when you're at home doing all the videoing yourself, like we are, it's doing the videos doing the same thing, really, because I'm there being the sound person, the engineer, the video technician and everything. I'm so worried about getting that right and getting the camera in focus and everything before I'm even doing the remote viewing. I don't even have time to think about the target at all, or what I'm meant to be getting. So I think that the remote view, the videoing of the remote viewing acts in exactly the same way as a distraction process. But not only that, I found that over the years using CRV, I tended to throw away and not move into stage 6, which was the modeling of the target, where you get your whole body involved in the target, and your whole body then becomes the receptor for all the signals. Because it was just too much trouble to get modeling K and bits and pieces out, and most time I just could not be bothered to do that. But what I'm finding is that the video whiteboard process is doing the exact same thing that Ingo envisioned the stage 6 would do. You're stood there in front of a whiteboard with a pen, so your whole body becoming engrossed in the process of remote viewing. And I feel that you do get some really extra strong signals start flowing through when you're doing that process.
Yeah, and for our listeners that are new to this subject, when you say CRV, you're talking about controlled remote viewing, and that's the methodology that Ingo Swann helped develop when he was a contractor for the military and working with the research units and the teaching the guys who went on to be in the operational units of the military, like Lynne Buchanan and Paul Smith. And so part of that methodology there's parts of it that are designed to distract you. Like, you have to keep your paper organized and you have to do certain steps. And when you first start out doing it, it's almost annoying or almost impossible to do, because you're like, how can I be intuitive when I have to be writing or keeping track of all this stuff? But the beauty of it is because you're busy, it's freeing you up, and then the information just starts flowing. So that's pretty much what you're referring to. Des, can you tell us, I'm so curious with this latest project where you were remote viewing Hitler. Can you tell us about that? Where did you have any idea who the subject matter was? First, if you could answer that.
Sure. It was a Farsight project, and Courtney tends to mix things up with these projects. So it was called Target 14, I believe. Yeah, Target 14. So that was the only information we had on it was Target 14. But what Courtney did was he had two targets as part of the same, multiple targets actually as part of the same project, but two main subject matters. One was the assassination of JFK, and one was Hitler. So one day I'd be doing, as part of Project 14, I'd be doing JFK, and the next day I'd be doing a target part of it, and it would be Hitler. So it was very confusing because I was saying to Courtney, and you know, he does this on purpose, so I can see why he does it, to keep us off balance. But at the same time, as a remote viewer, when you're slowly building up a picture of the target in your mind, it kind of interrupts the flow. And I guess that might be construed as being a good thing, really. But
so that was, let me ask you were going back and forth between the Hitler session, yes, and wow, that's great. That's great.
And you didn't know who they were, though, right? You just knew this. Did you know it was even a person? What was your front?
We didn't have any information. The only information we had up front was it was Target 14. So I didn't know it was two different people, or I didn't even know it was people. I mean, after my very first initial session, I kind of, you know, because you get data form in your mind, you have an idea. And the very first session I did, I had some very strong data that the target involved a passenger, and it was a passenger that was in a car or a vehicle, but it was also a passenger that was a passenger to an event that was happening around them. So very, very early on, I kind of, you know, now I'm looking back on it, I kind of had the idea in my mind that it was slowly building that it might have been something like JFK, because there aren't too many targets that you can think of in history that involves a person in a vehicle in an event type situation. But the Hitler thing was a complete red herring to me. I didn't think that at all. All I can say to Courtney was, on days I'd go back to him, I'd say, I'm sorry, Courtney, I just don't believe I'm on target, because yesterday I really like this person I'm viewing, and today I really hate them because they're really evil. So I don't understand why I'm mucking up here. And that was because he was keeping us off balance. And all he would come back and say was, he'd be there going, you know, you're on target, just carry on, don't act on it, just ignore it, just carry on, do what you're doing.
But there are two different projects, though, right? Or was it? Okay, so it was like Project 14 and Project 13 or something like that, or
Project 14A and Project 14B.
So Project 14A was JFK and B was Hitler?
I believe so. Yes.
Wow. Oh, that makes it even cooler, dude.
So
that makes it even cooler. That makes it much cooler.
It's complex. Yeah. So I can understand why he does it, but you know, I can also see from my point of view as being a remote viewer that there's a possible that there's an overlay between, you know, there might be an overlap or an overlay between the two, because, you know, when I'm doing 14B and I don't know it's a different target, I might just think it's the same target but in a different situation. I'm kind of getting evil, bad stuff, and I'm there thinking, and I'm contradicting myself in my mind. I'm thinking, well, he went evil yesterday. He was a nice guy, so why am I getting bad stuff today? You know, so it starts making you question yourself, which could be a bad thing.
Now, let me ask you, when you're getting into, you know, this, I like this guy's evil, or I like this guy here, I like this guy's evil. Where are we at on the process here? Are we beyond the paper sessions and into the whiteboard area? What part of the experiences are we talking about when you're into the mode of this guy, I'm getting this, I don't like this guy and I like this guy? How far along into the process are we talking at?
Yeah, that stage would be past the paper part. The paper, we do paper sessions, but they're pretty much warm-up sessions, really, just to kind of get us loosely on target. And then he says, okay, you know, you're kind of there or whatever, you know, go straight to the whiteboard and just do the same thing and expand it. And it's there. Yeah, I think the real hardcore detail now flows a lot more in front of the camera and on the whiteboard.
Let me ask you, I want to get into the red herring, because you call it a red herring, okay? So you had a target that was really surprising to you, or like, I don't know how to describe it, but let's take me into the part where you're starting to develop that type of reaction to it. Is it in the paper end of it? Is it the whiteboard end of it? When are you starting? Where are you starting to switch over from, all right, there's people over here, there's that over there. Okay, there's something, this is over here. Where are we at? Take me into that. Take me into where you're going into that. If you take me into your memories of that.
Okay. Well, for example, on the JFK session, I kind of, as I said, past the paper sessions, when I first went to whiteboard, I kind of really started to think to myself, okay, this is feeling a little bit like JFK, because I was picking up details of a person in a vehicle, and they were in an event, and there was crowds around, and they were all proud, and you know, they were all happy. But then the event changed instantly, and you know, I'm in front of the whiteboard doing this, so I'm doing my ideogram and my sketches, and you know, all this data's just flowing through. Some of it did come through on paper, but not too in detail. It becomes more in detail, you know, on the whiteboard. And at that stage, you know, I see this person. I know he's in a vehicle. I know he's moving. I know it's an event. And then all of a sudden, I feel that, you know, I just know that there's a change. There's a change in the event. And I see other motion as well. I see motion from two different angles in front, moving towards the vehicle and stopping the vehicle. I know that this is an explosive motion. So after time, you know, you explore this and you pick up, and I start to see that, you know, it's people that, and it looks like, well, it looks like some kind of, you know, angry, violent assassination type event. I know this, but at the same time, I'm trying to not verbalize this and say this. So I'm trying to be as descriptive as possible still.
Take me into the Hitler one, like the JFK one. Like you say, okay, there's a person in a vehicle and there's something going on there, and it's like, wow, there's not a lot of those things in history. So we can understand that, but the Hitler one, like you're saying, really was like out of a nowhere kind of a target.
Yeah.
And so take me through the progression, if you would, of was it in the paper end of it to where you're starting to immerse into it, to get to the point of, wait a minute, there's an evil guy here. Take me into let me follow along with you as you're going from the process into the experience of it.
Okay. The Hitler one was quite different. Again, it was, we did the preliminary work on paper, just to warm us up. And then we went to the video for the hardcore. And the Hitler one was, it was completely different for me. And I'm not sure I picked up as much on that one as I did on the Kennedy. Maybe because I did have a dislike for, you know, I just had a dislike for the internal feelings I was feeling towards this.
To explain that to me, if you could. When did you start feeling a dislike? How did it come through, and how did you express it?
It kind of comes through, and it's on the video really, but you can kind of see me probing I probed the life form, you know, because I know it's a life form that's involved in the target by this stage. So I essentially go into the mind and the body of this life form and start feeling my way around, and it's kind of like a real subtle feeling, but internally within me I just know that this isn't a nice person, that this is a person that's involved in some nefarious activities.
Was there a point where you felt it switched, like you were going from, okay, I think that the main thing I need to focus on here is a person, and then you recall when something switched or clicked over for you that, okay, yeah, I don't like this person, that kind of thing? Was it, do you recall the moment when that started to take over?
Only in so much as that it was in front of the whiteboard, doing what some people like to call it like the Star Trek mind probe type thing. I don't know what you call it. I just like go inside the person and see what I pick up.
And was there some things about Hitler that you learned that you hadn't realized before? I mean, once obviously, and for people who are just tuning in, again, Daz is describing a session where he didn't know that he was assigned to look at Hitler, but that was actually the target. So when you did learn it was Hitler, what did you have any aha moments like, wow, I didn't realize this about him, but now I've learned something from my session?
Only after I had feedback, really, because right until I had the feedback, I didn't even know it was two people. I just thought I was viewing a person that was good on one day and bad on the other. I just didn't know. I tried not to think about it. But yeah, what I found interesting on doing some research and finding my own feedback was in the session I picked up a lot of abuse. Hitler being abused when he was younger. I'm not sure if it was physical or sexual, but there was definitely a lot of mental abuse there, which caused an amount of schizophrenia and a lot of mental problems within the person that I was viewing, which caused them to not trust, have a lot of issues with people. And I picked up all this kind of stuff, and I think part of the target as well for both these were because they were both, at certain points, they were both death events as well. So I followed both JFK and Hitler past the point of both of them dying to what happens afterwards as well. So what we can essentially call an afterlife. Now, this wasn't part of Courtney's plan, and I've never done this before, ever, in nearly 2 decades. But I did it for both those life forms. So I actually managed to follow the life forms through as they went through a death process, leaving behind all the energies, emotions, all the worries about day-to-day life that we have as human beings. And then I managed to see them come through a process into a different place, a much calmer, whiter, just more beautiful, meditative place, where they met other beings. So, and that happened on both those. Now that's not in Courtney's video, because he took those parts out. But what me and Dick are doing is, within a very short period of time, we're putting out our own DVD, which is the 30-minute segment that's missing of me following JFK past the point of death into the next realm.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is just extraordinary, because this is actually the first time that I've heard, not that I've heard remote viewers talk about tuning into someone after they've passed on, but traditionally it hasn't been acceptable to talk about these things. And there's been a very wide divide between, let's say, mediumship or tuning into spirits or anything like that. There's been a big divide between that and what's generally acceptable and appropriate and scientific and professional when it comes to remote viewing. So this is very interesting. I would love to hear then how, what did you learn? Did you learn anything about the afterlife? And my other question would be, did these souls, if you want to call them that, once they passed on, did they have an understanding of the impact they had when they were here on Earth, whether positive or negative?
They, at the point of passing over, because like the JFK one, I use that one because it's an easier one for me, because I don't know, I had a bit more of a relationship with that one, I think, because he was just a nicer person. At the point of before death, I could, because he was obviously shot, there was all this, and this is on this session as well, so there's all this anguish, anger, all these questions that were going through his mind really, really fast. But then we're talking in a matter of, the whole process of dying to passing over, I felt was probably a process of literally just a couple of minutes. So he died, and as he was dying, it was almost like a switch that went off, and all those questions that he was asking, all those things he had in his mind about, he was asking questions in his mind, oh my God, I had things to do, my family, what's going to happen? All those almost instantly just switched and they just went. Then there was a very short period of time of nothing, and then that opened up into just, and it sounds like I'm just repeating what people say in NDE stories, near-death experience stories, but it was just white. It was just so calm and so white and so peaceful. The whole state then just became a state that, and the only time I've ever got close to it myself was in a state when, I'm in total relaxation, total meditation. That's as close as I can get to describing what this state was like. Very white, and his whole demeanor changed. It was almost like nothing, none of those questions or none of those feelings or none of that past instantly did not matter anymore. None of it mattered in any way. He was just totally at peace with himself. And as he was at peace with himself, out of the white kind of mist, I saw life forms form. And how they formed were, they were dissipated life forms. So they were in more than one place, and they were spread out, like little sparkles of light spread out. And the more JFK thought about what was happening in front of him, the more these sparkles moved together and coalesced into forms of almost physical beings. So yeah, they were dissipated and non-local. It was almost like these beings were everywhere all at the same time, and it was only his relaxation, meditation, or calmness and thinking about them that coalesced them into physical shapes in front of him.
Wow. And then what about Hitler? What happened with him?
It was pretty much, to be honest, it was pretty much the same experience for him. And I felt that again, I don't know the feedback on this, but I felt that his death was a violent death. Because, there are all these allegations that Hitler, moved to Argentina and got away, all this kind of stuff. I don't know about that. But yeah, I felt that he had a violent death, and he went through the same process, other than, his movement between the two processes, this short period of time. His questions that you were asking beforehand were a lot harsher, because he had a lot more that he'd done bad, and a lot more mentally wrong with him. So his time of asking those questions, those whys, all the questions that quickly run through your mind, almost like going through your life, I guess, recalling your life. His was a bit more expansive than the JFK one. But I know people probably won't like this, but, I saw him also come through some kind of veil into a calm, beautiful place where, he let go of everything that had happened in the past, and he had pretty much the same experience. I know some people won't like that, but I can't help what I got, really, data-wise.
Well, and again, for people just tuning in, this is really incredible because, again, you were totally blind you didn't know who these two subjects were. You didn't know that Courtney was giving you two different people, and you'd go back and forth between these sessions. It's really extraordinary. And the thing that Courtney does this in his, I took his advanced scientific remote viewing course, and this is part of his methodology where, for example, when you're exploring timelines, he'll tell you, don't explore the past, present, and future in a linear way. Do the past and then jump to the future and then go to the past again, and jumping back and forth. The same thing with, he doesn't want you to spend a lot of time when you're, say, at ground level and then mid-level and upper level. He wants you to keep jumping back and forth so that your mind can't make those connections, so that you're going to have to just be in the present moment and just let go of whatever you just got, not make those connections. And it sounds like that was kind of hard for you at times because you were remembering what you got the night before and then wanted to combine those somehow. And I'm sure you knew you're not supposed to do that, but it's, one thing to know that and another thing to do that.
Yeah. And it was an interesting set of targets, and I felt that the 30 to 40-minute segment was so interesting on its own that it shouldn't have been, it shouldn't have been just thrown to one side. So yeah, me and Dick are producing our own video DVD that's out soon. We've also got a few other people, and I think Lynne Buchanan's doing a part for it as well.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be narrated by Jeff Rents from the radio show as well. So we've got a few people involved in this. Yeah, and it's just one of those maybe DVDs, because there is no feedback as yet for what happens at life after death. So I can't say it's a definite truth or anything. I'm just putting it out there as an interesting experience, really.
Yeah, and why didn't Courtney want to include any of that on the video? Was it because it wasn't verifiable?
I don't know. We haven't really discussed that. To be honest, we don't have a lot of dialogue about these things. He tries to involve us. I do bits and pieces of artwork for him and stuff, but essentially I'm just a paid remote viewer, so I just do my stuff, and I have no say in what happens with it, really.
You got a question, Deb?
Yeah, I want you to have time to ask your questions too. Just speaking to that, that's great that you did a project with Courtney, and yet he doesn't have a problem with you taking some of the material and creating your own videos and spreading this. And as both of you know, there's been this large controversy in the remote viewing communities as questions come up around ownership of material. And when a viewer works for somebody else, does the viewer own it, or does the manager, or does a student own their material, or does the teacher? Well, we don't have to get too much into this subject, but I don't want to avoid controversy. I want on this show to be able to delve right into it. So maybe if we could start with Ed, what do you think about the subject of ownership of material?
I think any person creates, they should own it. I think that in terms of training, that's something, training with remote viewing, people really need to, I think this little drama, this soap opera thing we had to go through is something that people who are going into remote viewing, they really need to figure, if they're signing forms and doing that kind of thing, they really need to know what they're signing. I think that if someone produces something, they own it. And outside of that, I think it's anybody who tries to bring up a lawsuit, I think they're just ridiculous human beings. The whole thing is a ridiculous waste of time. That's how I feel about it. It's totally ridiculous. And if anybody were to bring that towards me for any reason, which I don't think they would be, I'd be really pissed about it. But it's just I think the whole thing was a ridiculous waste of time. If you produce something, it's your work, it's your art. And that's it. That's how I feel about it.
And what about yourself, Daz?
Yeah, I mean, I being an artist and a designer and whatnot. Anyway, I totally agree. And the laws on your side, really. Anything you create as any kind of artist or writer or anything, you automatically own the copyright on. And it's just ludicrous to claim otherwise. Especially if you can't show any signed licensed documentation. For example, with the Farsight stuff, we do have signed licenses with Courtney, whereas we allow Courtney, even though he pays us for the remote viewing, he doesn't own it. We own it as remote viewers, including all the video, and he's licensed. He has a license to use the material for promotion and for his videos. But essentially, we can do whatever we want as remote viewers with the paper and with the video sessions afterwards. And it's the same. It's the same with any industry. I'm a bit of a photographer as well, and people do ask if they can use my images, and when I allow them to, they have to sign a license agreement with me, and it should be the same with remote viewers as well. We all own our own work because it's all creative work in the end. And and Ed's right. It's just it was just a ridiculous waste of time and energy and money. And I made it. See, Courtney and Dick didn't want to go public with it, but I made them kind of, in the end, go a bit more public with it, because me and Courtney could both see over a period of 6 weeks, we could both see that Dick was deteriorating quite rapidly. You know, he was losing loads of money. He was having worries. He's got some illness problems at the moment. You know, that he's had long-term illness problems. That's why he's on disability and stuff. So he was really deteriorating, and he was saying he was going to quit remote viewing, and it was just really getting him down. Yeah. So we had to go public with it, because going public was the only way to force the hand of the people that were trying to bully, really. And they still got away with bullying to some degree, because you know, the other person involved, Hitomi, she had, without her say so, because she's got her own problems and she's in Japan. She essentially had her work exercised and taken down, and there are, you know, the people involved claim that they own all her work, which is just ridiculous.
It's crazy. That's crazy. I think it was great to go for you to really push going forward, because it sounds like Dick really needed some support. And I think that what he got was the support of the 99.9% of the remote viewing community who turned our attention towards that and said, that's utterly ridiculous. Yeah. And it's just nonsensical.
And you're referring to Hitomi. I've seen some of her work and it's incredible. And I was dismayed. I didn't get a chance to see the video that she did. Can you just tell us a little bit about that video, and how can people, if it's no longer available, how can people see Hitomi's sessions? Where can they find them?
Yeah. Well, as much as possible, I've got quite a lot of Hitomi's work on my website, remoteview.com, and I have some of Ed's on there as well. You know, because I'm happy to showcase anyone's work, and she has done some amazing work. And the God Particle DVD was it was an exceptional piece of work. It was well put together. The remote view on it looked absolutely stunning. She looked like she nailed the target live on camera. And for the life of me, I still can't understand why the people involved wanted the video taken down, because they all signed agreements, and you know, they all helped make the video. So it foxes me, really. And Hitomi, see, she's got her own health problems at the moment, and so she can't literally go online. And I hear she's in recovery now, but she's got some very serious health problems. So I got quite angry with it, because she's not able to defend herself, so she's had to stand to having her work exercised by these people, and that kind of gets my goat a little bit.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, so since we just have a few minutes left, if both of you could tell us, where do you think remote viewing is going, and what do people really, you know, I think we're all in the same position of, we want to advance the field and we want to advance our own work and the work of other people. So how can we best do that, and where do you see us headed? Are we headed in a good direction, or are we stagnant? Some people say we're stagnant.
Who wants to go first?
You go first.
I think that, well, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the remote viewing community as a whole, but for me, remote viewing is moving away from results focus, just a complete focus on results. And moving into the direction of the experience itself. And at least that's my passion of what I'm doing, and what I want to put out there is that remote viewing is an experience, and it's not something that's easily to describe. It's something that is better for someone to watch them do it. And see the spaces and the dimensions and the reactions, the mental processes. I think remote viewing is expanding out of its use as a military tool. I think that as a military tool, it was really compartmentalized and really put into a box, and it's coming out of the box now. And I think that the direction that it's going is in full-blown experience of it, and seeing what that's like, seeing what it looks like to see someone go through that. What it's like to see someone have an experience of where they're in another space and another time. And that's not just end result. That is the experience itself. There's this bubble of experience that I think is what needs to be shown or brought out, not just the end result. And so I think that that's where remote viewing is. We're kind of moving inward as opposed to moving outward to it, to see what it's like as an expression, as an experience.
And how will that help individuals? So let's say whether it's someone who's new to remote viewing or who's been doing it for a while, or even researchers to get that experience with you. How does it help them?
How does it help? I think that it helps in a lot of different degrees. It helps to break people out of what they've been taught what remote viewing is. That remote viewing is an information gathering tool. That's what I was taught way back in the day. And I had to take that, you take this concept on as a belief system. And so I had to take it and get rid of that. Remote viewing is an information gathering. Well, that's only one piece of what it is. It's so much more than that. So there's an infinite amount of things we can look at.
Talk about that just for a second. So talk about the other parts beyond the information gathering tool, because I'm learning something here right now, because that's how I've been thinking of it, as I'm getting information. That's what I need to do. So go ahead.
Oh yeah. It's for me, it's an experience. Remote viewing is an experience, and it's a form of self-expression. And so the way I gauge my experience is I will gauge it in comparison to what the point in time and space is, or what we call a target. If I'm able to have a full-blown experience, then the results will show in what I've experienced. But inside of that are the mental processes that we have to identify. When I went through my training, there was signal and there was noise. Those were the two processes, But as I threw away all that stuff that was presented to me, and started to study what Ingo Swann was studying, you find that there's a whole array of mental processes that exist below the threshold of our awareness. And as we're attempting to pull these inputs through, they're having to go through all of these mental processes. And we have to be able to identify them. And you have to go through the experience, is where you identify which ones are which. Yeah. It's not just AOL, it's memory comparison, or that's a preconscious process over here. It's creative additions. It's not just this flat analytical overlay, or imagination. Is another one that really upset me a lot, is where imagination is the only thing that they talk about. Well, imagination is only one of an array of mental processes that are taking place. It's not the only one. And so the pursuit is to find where the threshold of awareness is, find where the subliminal barrier is, what's happening below that, what mental processes exist down there, and we can find them through the use of the actual input or the target as it's moving through those processes. And we are explaining them and we are describing them as best we can, so that when we go back and look at it, we can say, oh, well, that's what memory comparison looks like, or that's the idea generation part of the mind right there, or that's the creative part of the mind right there. And we can see it because this input was moving through it and illuminating those processes. And that's why.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up. I was just talking to some students yesterday because I've written a few books on psychic development, and my first one came out in 2004, and that was really before at that point I was doing psychic work, but it was heavy on clairvoyance, and it was a verbal method. It didn't have anything to do with writing. And so in my book, I've always wanted to really delineate between the very specific abilities, our clairvoyance, our ability to see information visually, or our clairaudience, being able to hear information. How do we hear it? Does it just land in our mind as a knowing, clairaudience? Do we feel it, empathy or clairsentience? And all these abilities come about when we're doing remote viewing, even though we may not be traditionally in remote viewing learning, you're not using those specific words. But what I realized, and what I don't have in my earlier books, because I just didn't have the written experience, is that when the act of writing or using your body like you're talking about, the unconscious does come about more. So there's moments where you're not necessarily seeing a visual, you're not hearing something, but suddenly you find your hand just writing something, or you feel compelled to do something that seems ridiculous at the time. That's a subconscious coming through. And so I'm so glad you're bringing this up. And I guess my question then, or maybe a thought that comes up that you could speak to, is this is something that would have to be so fascinating to any psychologist, to anybody interested in consciousness studies. And yet I'm not seeing, I don't see you surrounded by a team of psychologists. I don't.
It boggles my mind. It boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Why it seems like that's one of my pet peeves in remote viewing, is that only certain things are interesting to people, and so few people are actually wanting to study our brains, really. I mean, luckily Ingo was so high profile. He had people like Michael Persinger and people like that who wanted to study his brain and that kind of thing. But in my opinion, we have, I don't know, I'm getting confused now just thinking about, because I'm getting so excited about it. This is a big topic for me. But we need to study our brains more. We need to find out what's stimulated when, what part of the brain is stimulated when we are actually in an actual remote viewing is taking place. What part of the brain is stimulated when an actual remote viewing is taking place? What part of the brain then gets stimulated when that input triggers a memory? And now we're over here and we're looking at a memory that is related to the input. What part of the brain is that? What part of the brain then adds things on, a creative addition? What part of the brain gets stimulated when they're adding things on to the actual input? Those are the things that I want to know.
But that has been done.
It's been done.
Yeah, that's been done. Persinger did that with Ingo, and they did all those type of experiments, and they because I spoke to him about this, and they even managed to record the perfect time of when Ingo was dead on with his remote viewing and did really good results. And they even managed to feed that signal back into other people and then use that signal for them to actually improve what they did with their remote viewing as well.
Yeah, we see. Why is that not on the front page of every newspaper?
And there's too, that was, I mean, yes, a lot of work was done around Ingo Swann, and Daz, I want to ask you about that a little bit more, but there's now hundreds of remote viewers who are highly trained, who are doing this work, doing it all the time. And then there's also hundreds, thousands of psychologists that are interested in transpersonal psychology, all sorts of looking at the liminal and subliminal, but there is very few looking at it in terms of people doing psychic work. And it just comes right back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this, which is that we have to get past just the results proving that this can happen. And as long as we have to keep proving it over and over again, then there's not time for people to be studying what we're doing.
Let me add something to that conversation real quick, because there's another aspect of it too, because we have the end result part of it, but the part that I think needs to be focused on is, what is the nature of these inputs? What state do they exist in? And as far as I know, well, we don't have the ability to gauge them, but I think we need to turn the attention towards that. What state do these things exist in? Not, just, the primary has been, tell me about this. Because that's what the military did. Tell me about what the Russians are doing. Tell me where the drugs are hidden on the ship, and tell me. Give me information. Just provide information for me. That's been the primary of it. But I think we need to turn the direction towards, what state do these inputs exist in? Is it a quantum image? Is it inside some kind of a photon feel? I mean, I don't even know. I have no idea, but I want to know. And we need to turn at least part of the attention towards, what is the nature of these. Ingo Swann calls them inputs. Another term for it would be the signal line or whatever. But one of Ingo calls them inputs, and I like the term, because they're inputs. It's very neutral. But what state do they exist in? Is it quantum entanglement? Oh, that sounds great. But how else do we describe that? And I think that we need to really look at that too.
This goes along with my idea. After I attended a Parapsychology Association conference, I had the idea of a program called Adopt a Parapsychologist, or Adopt a Remote Viewer. And wouldn't it be great if we could team up one remote viewer with a parapsychologist and a psychologist and a neurologist and a psychiatrist, just, a whole team where they all really in-depth study the process. And even if we just had 10 of these teams working together, so we could advance understanding of all of this, I believe just doing that alone could propel us forward 100 years of progress.
I think you're right. I like the idea.
So Daz, then if you can, you actually spent some time with Ingo Swann, who unfortunately is no longer with us. And there's a lot of remote viewers who so much respect his work, but didn't get to have that opportunity. How did you meet up with him? And can you tell us what the highlights were of your meetings with him?
Yeah, sure. I got to meet Ingo because over a period of years, I ended up defending him on public forums against people that were trying to tear down the original work that was done at SRI, saying it's invalidated and it wasn't done accurately, and all kinds of things like training doesn't work, CRV doesn't work, all this kind of stuff. And this happens a lot within remote viewing, because we are separated into tribes. There's no way around it. It's a very tribalistic community that doesn't work well together. So they were tearing him down, and he got to hear that I was defending him, and we ended up having a dialogue over a couple of years, which was very hard because Ingo, being a very creative person, but being older in years, didn't like to use technology. So all communication had to be done through me sending an email that then got converted to fax, which was then sent to a contact of Ingo's, read over the phone to Ingo, then Ingo would respond. So a really complicated process. But anyway, in the end, he said, if you ever come to New York, you can stay at mine, and we'll chat about these things. So I came into a little bit of money at the time and thought, Ingo's not getting any younger, so let's go to New York. So I went there and spent a couple of days, just talking to him. amazing experience, just like what you think it would be, but also a scary experience because it was Ingo, and you would have had to have experienced him to understand that, really.
Can you tell us about that a little bit? What
Well,
scary?
It's just his mannerisms, like I was sat, we were down in his studio, down in his basement, in front of the big Millennium painting that everyone knows. Sat at this wooden table where he trained all the remote viewers in the past. Him at one end of the table, me at the other. He was sat there with a big cigar, smoking away. And at one stage during the conversation, he says, I have something for you. I've written this. He says, you can publicize it whenever you want. And it was like 2 pieces of A4 paper. He shoved it across the table to me and said, okay, read it back to me. And I was like, what, is this guy serious? I haven't read to someone like this since I was in high school, kind of thing, but I just felt that, he's not the type of person you say no to. So I stood up and I read his statement and stuff. But that was only one of the things.
What did the statement say?
Yeah, what was it?
Oh, it was in the last. I think it was in the last 8 martinis. It was a statement about how people were trying to demolish remote viewing and all his work that he'd been doing through SRI, saying that training didn't work. And he essentially, the summary of it is, it doesn't take 20 years of funding to work out that training wouldn't work. But he also confirms other things to me. He did kind of confirm with a nod and a wink that there was another secret unit that he trained, which has been a rumor for many years. He also showed me the feedback and coordinates and data that he did when he did lots of the moon sessions for the Mr. Axelrod from his book Penetration, where he remote viewed bases on the moon, all this kind of stuff. So he showed me all that and all the material. And he also, by the side of the training table, it was just awesome. He had this big stack, I'd say 4.5 feet high stack of documents. What it was, it was stacked up layer upon layer, right by the side of him, up about this high. And it was every single one of the SRI training remote viewing sessions that all the military guys did. And they were just all stacked up because Ingo kept everything, all the training material and everything. And he just picked up a couple and slung them across the desk for me to have a look at. And it was Tom McNair training sessions that he'd done, really amazing archival stuff. So, I'm just hoping now that all this stuff is, now that he's gone, it's been taken in and it's going to be archived and one day made available to everyone.
Yes. So I was wondering, did he talk about his book Penetration? I had heard that after it came out, it went out of print for a while. I believe it's back in print, or at least available now, which is good because it was going for about $400 a copy. And it's I just loved it. It was really, really fun to read and very enlightening. But did he talk about his feelings about that book? Because I heard for a while that he really didn't want it to go back into print.
I asked him a question about the book, which kickstarted the conversation off. I said to him, Ingo, you've got to understand, this book's amazing. A lot of people like it, but there are a lot of people out there that are saying that it's not real, or that, the experiences are totally unbelievable. And he just looked at me flicking his cigarette, his cigar, and he said, well, how do you think it was for me going through them? So that confirmed to me that, that he really believed that everything in that book was truthful. And I have no reason, everyone's always said that Ingo's an honorable person, and I have no reason to disbelieve what he told me, really. And he essentially told me that all the experience in that book were true and they happened.
Wow. And was there anything that you learned just about remote viewing or just life from talking to Ingo? Anything you walked away from that you hadn't known before you met with him?
Only in some of our private dialogues. because we had some letters that went back and forth over the years. And I said to him in one of the documents, I said, not a lot of people understand this, Ingo, but yeah, I think you will. That I think that remote viewing, CRV in particular, all it is art. I said, you've got us sketching, you've got us doodling at first, which is ideograms. I said, then we move from ideograms through just sketches, and then we move from sketches later on to modeling. I said, so all you've done is made us do art. And he came back to me and said, hardly anyone's recognized this. He said, they've never understood this. He said, and it's so funny that I actually managed to make the military pay me money to teach them how to do art. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've carried that ever since. And being a designer as well as a remote viewer, I do believe the two go hand in hand. And the very place where I get my inspiration for logos, for photography, for any kind of creative process I do, and being able to nail that for the client each time, I know that the inspiration from that feels exactly the same and comes from the exact same places where all the remote viewing information comes from. There's no differences between the two. Well, I think that's what Ingo was trying to do. And a lot of people say CRV is hard and it's really formal, but you have to get past that. You have to understand that it is essentially just art that's been disguised to allow you to open up those creative processes, to get you to start thinking about talking, because remote viewing as well, and CRV, but remote viewing as well, is not about learning anything other than learning about yourself, really. That's right. That's what I've done over 2 decades, is I can now understand the very, very, and we're talking really incredibly microscopic, subtle impressions that come into me as a person. And it's just about learning what those are over a period of time and identifying those and having confidence in them as well. A lot of people don't have the confidence in these impressions, and they put them to one side, and say, no, I'm not writing that can't be right. But that's what it is. It's almost like over a period of time, I don't even care what the target is anymore. I don't even care if I'm accurate. The moment you start not caring if you're ever going to be accurate, that's when your remote viewing becomes good.
Right.
You're totally detached. I'm detached from anything. I don't care. Half the time I don't even get feedback. I just don't care anymore. It doesn't matter. It's not part of the process for me. If I get feedback, then it's all good. But yeah, because I'm detached from it, it just allows the creative freedom to flow that much better.
I think that this, I feel the same way, and I think that this is another part of the direction that it's going into. That has been missing, for the past 15 or 20 years or so, because it worked for me as well. And I think I read it in your book, that gave me that perspective. You were talking about the Ingo story that gave me that perspective, and it changed my course in remote viewing, and how one of the main changes was that it frees you up so much. Because in a lot of the training, it's so rigorous that it feels almost mental prison-like, and some even teach it that way. But once Ingo adds in the kicker, which is that, well, we don't want to discount the creative process. It just like blows the whole thing open. But I think that the thing about it is that it's this fine line, because over in the training end, it's be aware of your imagination, be aware of your creative processes. They'll lead you astray. They'll lead you astray. They'll lead you astray. And here you have Ingo laughing and, over on this side going, yeah, it's really just all a creative process. And then over here, we're so afraid, oh no, my imagination, ooh, it's going to throw me off. And Ingo's laughing over here going, yeah, it's all a creative process. But I think that part of it is what is going to open it up for so many more people. Because I've seen a lot of people go through remote viewing training and then never do remote viewing again. And you probably have seen that as well. They'll do their training, do a few sessions, and then they'll be like, oh God, I may never do it again. But injecting that other part of it, and that's a big big passion for me as well is that this is a form of self-expression.
Yeah.
Take that into your work, and not as opposed to, oh, I got to produce some results for so and so. They want answers. Oh, I'm so afraid of giving them the wrong answer. But when you get rid of that, it's just a form of self-expression, and that's the opening end of it. You know, I think, and that's where it's going, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting topic here, and this is really a subject of great controversy because you have former SRI directors Russell Targ and Ed May who say, well, Ingo, who came up with controlled remote viewing, he didn't use this extreme structured process when he started out just as a natural psychic, and then he learned things, and he was a research subject for a long time, and then he reverse engineered what he did and came up with the system. So there's the one camp that says, well, you don't need this structure, and then the other camp that says you have to adhere to it, or like you said, you're going to get astray. Do you just have a brief response to that?
Well, Ingo, I mean, they're right and they're wrong in that. They're right in the fact that you don't need it. But some of us, because we're all individuals, some of us work better with it. And Ingo did, if you look at the documentation, and it's out there, and I've got it on my website and in my books. For a number of years, the primary person that was the kind of guinea pig for CRV was Ingo. So he was training himself. He was deconstructing his own internal processes, but at the same time, he was doing it for a couple of years, learning and using CRV. So he was producing CRV sessions, and they're in the Stargate archives for anyone to see. So the fact, when they say that Ingo never used the process, then that's not essentially true. He did for a number of years. But CRV itself, I mean, before I came to remote viewing, I was a trained clairvoyant medium healer. I pretty much used every divination tool possible, from tarot cards, sand reading, tea leaves. I tried them all, and they all work for any individual. Anyone can use any of it, and you can use any of it for remote viewing if you do it within a scientific protocol. But what I found with those processes were that it was very chaotic, and the entire intuitive process was out of my control. So I was a passenger in a vehicle of the intuitive process. What I find with controlled remote viewing, and it's possible with any method type of remote viewing, is that it then switches places. You become the driver of the vehicle, and it allows me, instead of it being chaos around me and me being an observer, I am now the person that says, okay, I'm enveloped in this process. I'm going to go here, I'm going to look there, I'm going to touch this, taste this, smell this. So I'm in control of it. And that's all a method does. That's all CRV does, or any kind of remote view method. It makes you the explorer in control of your own intuition.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful analogy. And, I'm watching our pictures here, and this is symbolic of what's being talked about here, just as far as when I first came on here, I wanted all of our lighting to be, just right, and to have things controlled and, structured and everything. And as I've been watching, especially Ed there, when we started out, I was like, oh, your light's not right. But as you're talking about creative expression, I'm watching this beautiful sunlight pour in, and the shadows of the blinds and the light flickering. And it's just stunning to watch your picture now as it just unfolds. So,
that's just like my remote viewing. Yep.
It's just watching it is teaching me even about video production. It's like, okay, well, we need to have some things planned out, so it's not a total disaster or mess, but we have to be open to that creative expression. And I do.
Absolutely.
I've learned so much from talking to you guys today as well. And, the whole idea of
Can I add one more thing on the because we were talking about CRV or training and not training with that topic, and I will always tell folks that if they're interested, that they should find a legitimate, real CRV teacher and apply it, because what that will do is allow that if they go about it the right way, or if they have the right teacher, or a good teacher, or if they have the the direction to go in. But what it will do is allow them to begin to become aware of the processes below the threshold of their awareness, which is what you have to do in my opinion, to do remote viewing, and be able to distinguish between different processes. And so the pursuit or the training of CRV allows people to begin to kind of discipline themselves. And I say that term loosely, to be able to differentiate when they do go off into fantasy world, and what is the difference between an actual input and actual remote viewing, or going off into fantasy world. And that, I think, is why people should learn some form of structure to allow themselves to become aware of the difference between the two. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you. And, I really look at some of, I think, the difficulty in, or let's say this debate about do you need training or not, comes from when the guys were in the military or in the research lab. They had in the operational unit, they had monitors or people that were sitting there with them, and when they would get stuck on something, they had help getting out of being stuck, or they had someone pointing out what they were going through. And in the research unit, let's say with Russell Targ, where we've seen videos of incredible sessions with Hella Hammond, but he was with her. He was blind to the target, so it wasn't that he was mentally leading her. But when you watch those videos, you can feel he's in a trance with her, and he's suggesting, go look over here. And if she starts to get off, he says, no, don't do that. Go over from this angle. And what do you see here? So in the past, they worked as a team. The viewers, as far as I know, it maybe later on they started to, as they got more and more proficient, they worked on their own. But initially, they had someone walking through the process every moment. Fast forward to 2 decades later with us, we're all at our houses. Very few people have a monitor. Lori Williams, a CRV instructor that you guys all know, and who was one of my instructors, she has Jim, her husband, to do this for her. But very few people have this. Well, what would you say to that?
Well, I've never been monitored in pretty much nearly 2 decades. I wouldn't know where to start with that process, really. But I do understand though that. See, I'm not sure where. I don't even know how all this works yet. I do know that there's some kind of thing that happens between tasker and an analyst and remote viewer. I do feel that there's some kind of telepathic connection that goes on there. And it may be the same with a monitor, so I don't know really on that one.
Yeah, and I guess my point is just that because we don't have that, our monitors today are the structure or the training or what the teachers give us. We need something so that since we don't have an outside party telling us what to do, we can go look at the little set of rules that tell us what to do when we're getting stuck and get past those things. That's all we have.
Yeah, I mean, I love using a monitor. I mean, I've had monitors who had selected the target, like my buddy Jerry Hearthcock, and I've also worked with monitors who were blind to the target as well. And I love using a monitor. I've found that there's like a combined stamina that comes through. Like with Jerry, we had this idea of doing these full immersion sessions where we remote view all day long for like 2 days or like in 24 hours, So like it'll end up 12 hours of remote viewing with a couple hours break in between, because that's how we like to do it. I mean, and there's just some stamina thing going on there. But even with monitors who are blind as well, there's just something that as the viewers going through, doing our best to objectify all these things that we're suddenly experiencing. A monitor can pick up things that will just zip right past out of us, and we're just like, we got to keep going. But they'll be like, wait a minute, that thing you said over there was kind of interesting. Can you go back to that? So it's kind of like Daz working with Courtney, where he'll send his sessions over and, hey, you said something interesting here, or we would do with a project manager.
Yeah.
But with the monitor, it's right there. It happens right there. I love working with monitors. I mean, I don't get to do it very often because it's a lot of coordinating, but I just think it's fantastic.
I've only really done it a few times, and I just wanted to punch my monitor out because they were interrupting me. I was like right there and they were interrupting me. But of course, it really depends on, is the monitor in tune? And sometimes I probably need to be interrupted because I'm focused on something that, is emotionally stimulating, but really isn't that important to the.
What I will say is like Jerry. Jerry will select the target, so he'll know what the target is. He doesn't know what the target's about, but he'll select it. It's some unknown thing typically. But the thing is, you have to trust this person.
Yeah.
So like when he and I get together, we're two people who are so curious that we're going to, like, he says, like, we're riffing, we're like a garage band, we're just in the garage and we're riffing off each other with the guitars, coming up with something. And it's very much like that. But my excitement and curiosity and his intense curiosity, it just builds this energy and momentum. And it just really kind of, his curiosity makes me curious. So if he's curious and I'm curious, and it just grows, and it's a lot of fun. It's just I love it because it's just so much fun. We just have a great time. But I trust him, which is what I wanted to say.
Trust in relationships, very key to remote viewing, really, especially when you're working projects. And what I find over the years is I have a similar kind of experience with Courtney. Really, there's a trust there that I know that he's not going to give me a really absolutely crazy stupid target that should not be a remote viewing target, and he's not going to waste my time. So there's this dialogue and there's this relationship there, and it helps because I have this trust there, and that trust allowed me then just to do my thing. Whereas there are other people that I've worked with, and I've worked with them for years, where I can outright say that I still do not trust them now that they won't pick a dodgy target. And because of that, my hit rate on targets with them is much less and much less detail, because that relationship just not exist. So trust is very important, I think.
Yeah, very much.
I have a question, Daz. Some people suggest that if the project manager, let's say in the case of Courtney, and for those tuning in, we're talking about Courtney Brown of the Farsight Institute, who does these really fantastic projects, but he is a controversial figure. And for example, we all know that he's really into aliens. And so there is the thought, well, if he really believes in aliens, then could his belief, if he gives someone a target, like let's say with the Phoenix Lights, how do we know that what you're tuning into is actually the truth and not just what Courtney believes to be true? Even though I know Courtney does everything he can so that, his beliefs won't bleed into it, but how can we be sure you're not just reading his belief system?
Well, I don't think we ever can be sure, really, because we don't know how remote viewing works. Even after these 40 odd years, we don't know what role the tasker plays. We don't know what role anyone plays. I mean, if you look at quantum mechanics and physics, the observer theory, anyone that ever views or looks at what we do is integral as part of the project. So each, all the people 10 years down the line that look at the videos that we're producing, they may be having an impact on the video as it's being produced when we actually did it, because all this information travels backwards and forwards in time, and it's all non-local. So yeah, we may never know that, but at the same time, in relation to the alien stuff, and not everyone knows this about me, but for the last 15 years, I've run one of the biggest UFO websites on the internet. Before I got into doing remote viewing, I was a UFO researcher in the UK. I accumulated 20,000 pages of Freedom of Information documents, and I had every major piece of footage from 1947 up to 2005, and we're talking about 18,000 hours of video footage. So
oh my gosh, I had can you tell us what your website is?
the website is still up. I haven't updated it for about 5 years because I've moved on to remote viewing now, but it's called crowdedskies.com. I went to all the UFO conferences. I've amassed a huge library. I'm talking a huge library of thousands of UFO books, which I've read cover to cover. So if anything was ever going to influence my view of UFO targets, I would have thought it would be my own internal things. Like, for example, the Phoenix Lights. Over the years, I've done much more research on that project than Courtney could ever have influenced me with in any way.
Wow, I had no idea. And so then I know we have to come to a close pretty soon here, but my gosh, so of course you were blind to the target, so you didn't know when he was tasking you with the Phoenix Lights, that's what it was. It could have been any subject matter in the whole universe. So did you learn something from the Phoenix Lights project that you hadn't known before from doing all this other research?
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, there's a part of me that believes, because I've seen all these thousands of hours of footage and photographs, documents. You don't when you read thousands of pages of documents from the FBI, the NSA, NASA, and everyone all talking about UFOs and aliens, you kind of start to build a picture that there's something happening out there. But at the same time, it's like everything else with me. I'm not 100% sure, what is happening. I know something's happening, but I don't know beyond doubt. So that when I get to do a target like the Phoenix Lights, and the UFO ones, don't come out that often for me in these 20 years I've been doing this. But when I get to do like the Phoenix Lights ones, and then I get the feedback, and I see that it's the Phoenix Lights, and I did it blind, that gives me more reinforcement than seeing a video, seeing documents, or anything else I can find on the internet, because I know myself that Courtney didn't tell me that target. He didn't subliminally tell me. I did it completely blind. So I know myself that information came from somewhere, and it didn't come from my personal knowledge of the target, because I was blind to it and I didn't know that's what I was viewing at the time. So it came from somewhere else, and it just reinforces my view, really. It kind of builds on it.
One thing that it's in Joe McMonagle's book, Remote Viewing Secrets. He was talking about this subject, and he was saying that when he was doing these outbounder experiments, what he was interested in, or in his own mind, was to find something. He didn't want to read the person's mind. He wanted to kind of take that off the shelf, that he's going to be reading the mind of the person who's at the location. And so he wanted to find something that was there that person didn't see. And so he did this outbounder experiment, and in his mind, he's like, yeah, and then there was this, this red spiraling ladder, or the staircase. And so the outbounder person was that on the location, and they didn't see anything like that. So when Joe went there, he's like looking around for it. He's like, hey, wait a minute, did you go through that door? And the guy's like, no, I didn't go through that door. He goes and opens the door, and there's this red spiral staircase. So he's not reading this person's mind.
Right.
That's a big thing to keep in, that we need to, and that goes to the skeptics too, because the skeptics are like, oh, they're just reading each other's mind. They were like, that's no big deal. It's like, oh, well, that's no big deal. But it's more than that happening.
Yeah, I found this out about a decade ago when I was doing clairvoyant training with some of my students over the phone, and I would give them, say, a photo to be describing. I was looking at the photo right there, and they would start to talk about just like reflections, or sometimes they talk about things that I was like, no, that's wrong, that's not in it. And then I would watch back. I had filmed the whole thing, or take pictures, and I would see, oh, wait a second, there's, they were seeing this door inside this photo that was like a photo of a cat. I'm like, there's no door here, it's a cat. But when I look at the photo, you can see the reflection of the door in my office right there in the photo. So I had a number of experiences like that. Or they saw something moving, and I'm like, no, there's not anything moving. And then when I look back at it later, yes, the wind was blowing the whole time. So I started to realize they're tuning into things that I'm not aware of, so it can't be them just reading my mind. There's a combination. But
yeah, I think that goes along too of expectations. This is something I've talked about a lot too, is and this goes along of how people perceive remote viewing as a topic, and expectations, I think, are a big limiter, because if somebody comes into this and they think that their session is going to be an exact representation of the feedback photo, then they're the ones who are most likely to move on to something else 10 minutes later. Because there's so much going on. It's like that, again, like the tip of the iceberg thing, there's so much going on. I mean, I've had a lot of targets where I've done the session, and I know in the session something was happening, an actual remote viewing was taking place. I could tell there's something almost tangibly specific about that experience, as opposed to another process in my mind creating something. They're two completely different textures of sorts. And so certain things I'll have to go and research. It's like, there it is, that's what it was. Or maybe move back in time, yeah, that's what I was interested in. So I mean, we're dealing with an unknown. We don't know how this works. And we don't know how we can do this. And just in trying to understand what exactly took place during an actual remote viewing is a whole nother field to study, because like Ingo said, and many or those guys, it could take a long time before you get your feedback, because you got to try to find what it was that you were actually drawn to describe.
well, and I love what both of you have said, but what Dad said a little while ago, which is there may be people in the future that are looking at the videos that you guys are putting out right now, when they're watching you guys do your work. In 2 decades from now, they may look back at what you did and really learn from it, and see where you may have gotten off, or just learn about phenomena that we're not even aware of yet, but that there's going to be a record now that they can study. That's one of the things that I've been really advocating for in the different remote viewing groups that I work with, is that there actually is so much good work being done right now. Whether it's this video work, there's so much in associative remote viewing. I mean, hundreds, thousands of trials going on, but a lot of it isn't getting written up, and it's not getting reported. And there's small communities that talk about it and share and learn from each other. But it's so important to create this historical record. And I know I'm just preaching to the choir, because I mean, look at Dad's, can you just, in wrapping up here, let people know what it is that you have on your website, because you have really created the largest historical record of remote viewing material that there is freely available to the public. So how can people access that information?
Yeah, they can find it on www.remoteview.com. And at the moment it has everything. It has hundreds of my remote viewing sessions. It has some of Ed's. It has some of well, anyone's on there. It's got all the military remote viewers, remote viewing sessions. I think I have about 300 of theirs from the SRI program. That's thousands of pages of documents from the Stargate program itself, from SRI, and all the important documents. It has a vast bibliography of books, papers, transcripts, radio interviews. That's all on there. Lots of posts that people had from their very early conversations in news groups. Yeah, pretty much anything you'd want to find is on there, really.
Okay, and what is the website again? It's
remoteviewed.com.
remoteviewed.com. Okay. And yeah, and I hope Ed May is releasing a lot of the Stargate material that never came out. So I hope that you can get with him. And
I'm very interested in this because, I don't want to get into it, but legally he shouldn't, there shouldn't be stuff that he has that isn't in the public domain and owned by the people that, the taxpayers that pay for it. That he says hasn't been released before, because that's
exciting.
It's interesting. Yes, I'm dying to see what it is, and he's claimed for many years that there's stuff in there that says that CRV doesn't work, never worked, or never worked any better than anything else, even though the rest of the Stargate documents do not reflect that fact. So I'm interested to see what that is. Yeah.
Well, and I just want to share, getting back to the UFO topic. Well, this morning when I woke up, I was lying in bed and I saw this face. At first, it looked like an Asian woman looking at me, and I'm like, who is this? And then I noticed the eyes were like completely black. And I was like, this kind of looks like an alien. And I was like, well, I'm going to be meeting with Daz and Ed. So who most likely to have some connection with some kind of odd looking alien being? So I didn't see anything more than that, but it was kind of a strange thing to wake up to. So we'll stay tuned on that one.
Well, I think if we could go for just one more hour, we could really get into some really good stuff here. I think we're just getting warmed up here.
I know. Well, we'll meet back here again soon. Let's do this again for part
2.
And Ed, how can people get in touch with you and see some of your work?
Well, my website, erviewer.com, that has a lot of my sessions up there, and as well with some blog posts and that kind of thing. I haven't updated that in a long time because I don't like writing up a lot of stuff. It just drives me nuts trying to write up all kinds of stuff. I just like to do the videos and put them up. So, but there's a lot of stuff on erviewer.com, and then everything is on my YouTube page, and that's just Edward Riordan. So I think I just uploaded number 120 or something like that. So there's plenty of stuff up there of all different types. I tried to cover every protocol type that I could think of, be it straight CRV, triple blind, double blind, single blind, everything except for front loaded. I'll never do a front loaded session. So I basically try to put up every other type of combination, but you'll never see anything front loaded, other than I did do some videos where I wanted to explore specific things. So they were only people targets, or they were only object targets, or they were location targets. And so I had just a piece of that being, okay, the target is a person, only because I was curious as to being able to explore more of how I remote view people, or how I remote view places. So that kind of thing, but they're all total blind other than that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much. It has been such a pleasure meeting with you guys, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Daz.
And I'd like to say thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in to our very first episode of The Other Side of the Curve. I'm your host, Debra Katz, And until next time, have just a wonderful time exploring all the different realms of your conscious and subconscious and having a great time.